this World Cup, what happens? None of it. It's back to 25 plus 10, which is almost like a classical rapid. And then you switch to the 10 minutes plus 10 seconds. Very, very difficult because the rhythm changes.
The rhythm changes and there's little time to make that switch from classical to slow rapid to fast rapid, eventually blitz. It's going to be about the nerves. It's going to be about the tension, who can bring out their best in those critical time scrambles. And the one man who has done it over and over again on our screen, Hikaru Nakamura, but it hasn't been easy for him.
Again, this is, I believe, the scenario that Hikaru hates the most, because okay, he would love to be in a comfortable situation playing the second game, but in order to do that, he has to strike in the first one.
And very early on, just round 2 of the World Cup, we've already had some shocking upsets. Notibek Abdusatrov makes his exit. Shakhriyar Mamedyarov is out. Sam Shankland is out. Which top seed is in maximum danger today?
Well, I think no one is safe. Really, no one is safe. I mean, also the trick with this 25 minutes that you have to slow down. Actually, it's the favorite time control personally for me, because I feel that you have time enough to spend in the opening and in the early middle game to try to get the control of the game. And once you have the control of the game, you can already speed up. But for me personally, it's very important that if I, for example, spend 10 minutes, then I still have 15 minutes to, not immediately this time travel situation, like I only have 5 minutes and it's chaotic and I'm getting very excited and too nervous. So one really has to spend time, not rush too much, because if you try to flag your opponent right from the start in a 25 minutes rapid game, it will never work.
Wow, and you can almost feel and sense the tension there in the playing hall. It's going to be a day of exciting chess. Hikaru versus Karthik on the top board there, as Magnus Carlsen is already through to round 3. We also see Vidit Gujarati, a big fan favorite, starting with the black pieces. It's not going to be easy for Vidit. Right behind him is countrymate Arjun Argasi, also ready for the match. Earlier on, we saw former world blitz champion Maxime Vacher-Lagrave. All the big names in the chess world. So many juicy matchups. And is that Anish Giri yawning? It's not a good time to feel sleepy right now, Peter.
No, not definitely not. I mean, we talked yesterday about that. Usually before the start of the game, even in a classical game, you are very nervous and you are very tense to expect what's going to happen. And then imagine, this multiplies in the rapid format. You don't have time. If you get surprised or whatever, then it might be very unpleasant. It's very important to get a good opening that you feel comfortable with, that everything goes according to the plan. Then you get a lot of confidence for the rest of the game.
And starting with the white pieces against Anish is Nestorov Arsene. And Peter, you called this out, that maybe Nestorov is not as much of a household name as Anish, but he is a very, very dangerous youngster that Anish is facing. It's going to be a much closer match and a much closer tiebreak than one might assume looking at their ratings.
Yeah, I mean, you shouldn't be looking at ratings when you look at some young players, and young players like Nestorov with a lot of experience, I think, in rapid time control. So definitely not going to be easier than in the classical games.
It's not going to be an easy day in the office for Anish Giri, but the one man who's happy to have a day in the office has got to be Wesley So. He was almost eliminated in his match yesterday, American, with some brilliant play, getting a near-winning position, but he's got to do it all over again. And with that big save by Wesley, has the momentum shifted for the man who's currently not present on our screen?
Yes, it's interesting because in the classical game, I think there is a 50 minutes time to come to the board. There is some penalty, financial penalty, but you are not losing the game. I'm not exactly sure about the rapid rules.
I'm not sure, Peter, because I think Eltad Safarli actually had to forfeit his game because he didn't show up in one of the rounds.
Yes, but I think he simply missed more than 50 minutes. But we already have liftoff.
Liftoff action is on, and this is our top board for the playoffs. Hikaru Nakamura with the white pieces. And Peter, he's chosen an offbeat opening, just saying, I don't want to get into any theoretical battles with you. I just want a game. What do you make of this approach by Hikaru?
Well, it's a very logical and clever choice. However, I think that if somebody follows Hikaru's games online, then he very much loves to play this in rapid and blitz time control. So basically, if Kartik is really professional, then he had to kind of anticipate it, yeah, because it's the favorite weapon of Hikaru.
And we see Hikaru is the first one to take a pause. Slightly surprised by this last move, a developing move by Karthik. Peter, I'm not very familiar with these structures. Bishop to d7, is that something that should have surprised Hikaru?
Well, it's a very solid move, but actually, if we talk about this, that just very quickly, knight f3, d5, e3, c5, b3. It slightly looks mysterious, but on the other hand, it's a queen India reversed with a tempi up for white, actually, and this is what we are seeing. It's almost like the Petrosian variation of the queen Indian, and Hikaru plays exactly my favorite move there. Because after castles e6, he went back knight d4 to f3. This is a key move, not trading the knight on c6. We want to keep as many pieces as possible. And we have some very nice development with knight bd2, c4, eventually getting ready to play a3, b4 as well. And we see that this bishop on d7, which would have been very good if there would have been a trade on c6, then the bishop would have very comfortably sit on c6. But now with the knight on c6, this is not possible. And in long terms, black will have some problem with this bishop. I'm loving this type of positions usually for black, but now it's a reverse situation, so for white.
And Karthik keeps up with the speed, which is good news for the Indian fans because it's definitely an opening that you don't consider as the big one that Hikaru will play, but he has made sure that he doesn't go into a long thing. He needs to keep those seconds on his clock when he's playing against a speed chess specialist like Hikaru Nakamura. Peter, this one is going to heat up. Let's do a quick opening tour and take a look at some of the other boards as the action is on all around. And I want to draw your attention to Anish Giri versus Nesterov, a matchup that we have been talking about, but we haven't been able to have Anish on camera, and today we do. So let's take a look. It is quite a sharp position out of the opening, and I think it was the Grunfeld.
Yes, it's the main central variation of the Grunfeld with bishop c4, knight e2, the good old classical Sevilla variation. Of course, it's Sevilla variation if black plays with bishop g4. Anish played the modern line with b6, bishop b7. And I believe this is a line which Anish is a very big expert from the white side. He has been the one who invented this idea going bishop b5 and capturing on c6, giving up the light squared bishop, which is a very strange thing at first sight. However, it has a very deep strategical idea. And it will be very interesting to see how he fights against his own weapon.
So voluntarily giving up the bishop pair here, Nesterov, which definitely has to be preparation. And look at that, Nesterov has more time on the clock than what he started with. And Peter, often when you've given up the bishop pair, you need to keep the position blocked. When black recaptures, I'm a little familiar with these positions, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but for white, it's very key that after the bishop is retaken, white actually wants to keep the center intact with the move d5 and make sure that you can actually restrict the light squared bishop. And eventually, in return of giving up that bishop pair, white wants to continue the advance on the king's side. We can expect a move like f4 at some point, gaining more space and trying to control as many central squares as possible.
Yes, exactly. I mean, this is the strategical idea behind it. So, for example, if we are really given the chance of simply taking and going d5, already looks very sympathetic for white. The bishop falls back, for example, to b7. We can also reinforce our center with c4. We are planning to go queen d2, trading the dark square bishops with bishop a6. And after we traded, then eventually the f pawn starts marching down the f file, and it will create really very serious mating threats against black's king. So Anish has to be very precise here, and he's posing, he's taking his time, which means that he he isn't so familiar with exactly this move order, because usually white includes a move like queen d2 first, and only after goes for this bishop b5, bishop takes c6. That white opted for direct idea with rook c1, bishop b7, and bishop b5. Even the greatest theoretician of modern times, Anish Giri, is surprised.
Yeah, he definitely went into quite a think there and eventually recaptures with the bishop. And we see the move has been blitzed out. Nesterov showing immense opening confidence there, continues to play fast. D5 on the board. And Peter, these ideas that we were highlighting, especially if white is able to trade off these dark squared bishop, a key defender in the Grunfeld, a key piece in the Grunfeld for black, one can imagine a lot of pressure coming up on Anish's king. That yawn that we saw him from before, all that sleep is out of the window already. And I think Anish is feeling a bit of tension here in the position.
For sure. I mean, one thing that he did not expect, I believe that he will get immediately some kind of problematic position and things to solve. Yeah, in a rapid game with 25 minutes, you really want to get a comfortable position. However, the good news is that it's not a 10 minutes rapid game where you have to instantly play according to your intuition, and you might make some inaccuracies and you end up in a very bad position. He takes his time. He wants to understand,
Wow.
because he
Did
knows
you
the
see that,
position.
Peter? Peter, did you
What?
see that on the camera?
No, what happened?
Anish, he put the bishop on d7 and then he put it right back on c6, hesitating about his move, and that's not a good sign. And he changes his mind and puts bishop to b7.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's nervous. I mean, one can really feel that
Oof.
he is nervous, and the position gives all the reasons for him to be nervous because he is out of his comfort zone. Yeah, white plays c4, and white's play is so simple. Yeah, it's so easy to explain what white wants. So black needs some very special move per move solution to the problem. Otherwise, white will just get an overwhelming position.
I'm really surprised about what just happened because you don't get to see that at the top level so often. This hesitancy and sort of a switch of mind that we just witnessed from Anish. And he is, of course, one of the strongest players in the world when it comes to Grunfeld and opening preparation. Nesterov right now putting the pressure on his higher rated opponent, and this one's going to be quite a big fight. Peter, let's continue our opening journey of our featured matchups, going on to board number 3 of the Fide World Cup with Emre Can against Wesley So.
Yeah, they are, I
This-
think, continuing their debate from yesterday in the Catalan, but now Wesley plays the line which he should have played yesterday. I mean, he should have played the line that he would have played against Magnus and against anyone else in the world. We saw that he was a little bit, trying to spice things up. And what happened as usual? You end up spicing up things against yourself. But now he's back to no more a5 business, just to the very solid b6 line. Rook d1, bishop a6 played. And now after c takes d5, c takes d5, knight c3, b5, a4, we have the current position.
And a4 is a very direct move by Emre. He's targeting this b5 pawn. And if black makes the natural looking b4, because you really don't want to trade these pawns, opening up the a line, creating a weakness on a7, which is much easily attacked compared to white's weakness on b2. Maybe we can just show it with some arrows, Peter. If black was to recapture on a4, white has the luxury to pick it up with any of the pieces. And then you've got a clear direct target on a7. The move that Wesley's gone for, b4, is the one that I wanted to bring your attention to, because now white has a very juicy option of actually not retreating with the knight, but jumping forward to b5. And I would love to see that happen on the board.
Exactly, that's the principal move. That's why I wasn't also completely sure how comfortable this position is after b4 for black. But judging by the fact that Wesley has quite quickly decided on b4 means that probably he knows that this is all under control.
Wow, and as Emre decides to take a little bit of a think to pick the square that he wants to move the knight to, knight b5, I really like it. If black doesn't pick up that knight, there are all kinds of threats on the c7 square. The knight will continue jumping forward, and it is on the board. All across, we're seeing these heavy favorites, top seeds, sort of face the brunt of opening preparation of the underdogs. Knight b5 on the board. Will Wesley take the decision to part with his bishop pair? He says, not happening today. Brings the rook into the game, attacking white's queen.
Yes, exactly. So now the very big question, what happens on this critical c7 square? It does seem like white is unable to use that. Yeah, for example, if white plays a move like knight c7, then black probably can fall back with the knight to e8 and using the pin on the queen on the c file. And the typical g7, g5 idea is there for black, kicking away white's bishop on f4, which protects the c7 square. And this is a very thematic way of dealing with knight c7. So that's why after rook c8, probably the queen has to move. Another move that's kind of typical in this position would be bishop c7, but it again leads into some pin. And black has all kinds of possibilities, maybe even possible to take on b5, but in any case, this pin will be a big headache for white. So I'm expecting white to move his queen.
I think bishop c7 and black capturing that knight on b5. The tactics just seem to work out in black's favor over there with the pin along the c file. So Wesley has made the move rook c8. Emre needs to decide where to place the queen. A very thematic square here is the b3 square. It's very safe there, the queen, as well as you eye that big b4 pawn. The knight can eventually jump to d6. The knight is jumping to a7. I do like the way Emre has handled this opening, Peter. And queen b3, you're pointing out that black will return the favor by making the same move with his queen.
Exactly, yeah. The queen b6, just as you said, the d6 square is vital. Yeah, the queen covers the d6 square, also putting pressure on the b5 pawn. Okay, it's not yet a real big threat, because if you play something like e3, then if black would try to take the pawn, actually it's not winning a pawn at all, because white will get to the a7 pawn, and with the bishop moving to f1, the light squares and everything would be in white's favor. So queen b6 is a good move to play, but not necessarily by capturing the knight immediately, simply maybe going h6, going knight e4, just making all the useful moves, because it's also not obvious how white should be improving his position.
Big action on this board as well, exactly how we like it. Peter, let's continue, because next up on the board is former World Blitz champion, the Frenchman with three names, Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, playing against Valentin Dragnev of Austria. And wow, this is a wild open position. And even though there are such few minor pieces left, I think white is really piling on the pressure. Is Maxime in trouble here?
Wow, I mean, first of all, looking at the position, I had the feeling that Maxim should be white, right? I mean,
I thought
because
the same.
yes, it really looks promising. It's a nice kind of Sicilian from the white side, and then we see that he did not play. He did not play his beloved Najdorf. What happened? Ah, no, because of queen takes d4. Okay, so it was Valentin who came up with this surprise, forcing Maxim into slightly unfamiliar territories. And this is how he surprised him. Okay. Very interesting strategy. Also, we see that disbalancing, not going for the absolute main lines against the top guys might be a clever idea. But how did they? Ah, wow. Did Maxim actually just miss that after queen a5, knight takes c6 is possible? Because it looked like there is a pin on the bishop on g5, but after knight takes c6, queen g5 check f4, that's how we ended up in this position. Queen c5, takes, and f5. Now rook fd8 had to be played. Black is trying to trade as many pieces possible, but there is some pressure.
Really nice point there. And I think you hit the nail on the head, Peter, that it's very possible that Maxime just assumed that white can't trade the knight with the bishop because he picks up the bishop with the check. And f4 could have been the resource that was missed playing the move fast. But now, if you look at the position, it's even position and it looks like this should be equal. But the problem for black is that you will end up with a weak pawn on e6. There's no way to fight against that. He does jump in with the knight to d5. White can simply sidestep with the queen, and the trade on e6, creating a huge weakness in Maxime's position, is inevitable. Black will be on the defense for the rest of the game.
Exactly. I mean, of course, black's position is quite solid. There are not so many pieces on the board, but if there will be a weakness on e6, that would be a long-term asset for white. The big question is what to do with black. Is there some way to use the activity of the knight on d5, because we do see at the moment that white's knight on d1 is a little bit far from the action, or if there is a time to put the knight back to c7, which looks like a very ugly move, but it might serve a very nice purpose of protecting the e6 pawn. And if you would be able to capture e6 with that knight, probably you would be more or less solving your problems.
It was an alternative, but Maxime, with a different approach, also want to highlight that Dragnev's retreating queen move is quite precise, because had he played the queen to any other square, if we just back up one move really quickly, Peter, any other square, it would have allowed black to come in with a check with his own queen on g5, get out of that pin, and pick up the f5 pawn. So Dragnev, with precision, retreating the queen to d2, and instead of the idea that you mentioned, Maxime, goes with rook d8, so he is inviting the capture on e6.
Yeah, and okay, if fe6 happens, then okay, it should be some kind of a long grind. Ask Maxim. If we could ask Maxim, he would say, yeah, let's turn the board, give me this possession from the white side, I will be enjoying it. It does not mean that black really has serious problems. It's just that white has the upper hand and can try to squeeze it without taking any risks.
Maxime would love to be white in this position. Any player would, because you're essentially just playing against a big weakness in black's camp. Peter, Maxime has to try and keep this one under hold. There are only 2 games in each of the rapid formats, in each of the speed chess formats. So losing game 1 would just create big trouble for any of the players, and they're really on their last life trying to stay alive at the World Cup. Let's continue. On the other boards, we also have another former World Blitz champion, Alexander Grischuk, who's fighting it out against the young Iranian Daneshvar Bardea. And Peter, wow, this is a wild position already. White has shut castled, but also Harry the H-pawn is in action.
Yes, this is some old main line in the Caro-Kann. We do see that Grischuk has spent quite some time already. I even have some deja vu feeling. It almost resembles my game from Dortmund Candidates 2002 against Bareyev. I believe my pawn was on c4 instead of c3, but maybe almost everything is identical. And the big question always in these positions that should black castle, can he castle? Because white has the option of jumping with his knight from gc to f5 using the pin along the e file. And it often comes down to the position that does black have a good way of dealing with this? Yeah, and often he can, but also quite often it's a problem. And I believe that in this position, it simply looks like it should be some kind of a problem unless black can immediately target this rook on e7. Yeah, probably with rook a8, fighting against this invaded rook. And here we might be seeing a big difference. With the pawn on c4, it would be a completely different story. All these small subtleties make such huge differences in this type of positions.
Really nice points there. And I think the big difference also here for white is that after rook e8, you really can't control the e-line because the rook from a1 has to guard that a2 pawn. So white doesn't have the option to actually double up on the e-file, as black will simply pick up the pawn on a2. And there are threats that you're pointing out with the knight as well, jumping on to d5 with some potentially good trades for black. So knight f5 might not be as dangerous as it seems at first, but definitely a position that has a lot of potential for an exciting middle game. We've seen a pawn on h4, black accepting the dangers of the king side and going short castle. Will we see a knight jump to the center of the board with knight e5 coming in? Will Alexander Grischuk decide to go with knight f5 anyway? Peter, hot action across boards. Is there one that catches your attention?
Well, I think that we have tons of action. I'm very happy also that we have a chance of covering Alexander Grischuk's match, because also he's playing against the new Iranian prodigy, Daneshvar, who might not be so known, but he is making tremendous progress recently. I think in the last 1 year, he has gained more than 100 points. And he's climbing, and I believe that he's already clearly a 2600 plus player. His rating is also slowly catching up, or maybe not even slowly. He is now 25.77, and it's not going to be an easy match for Grishuk, not at all.
None of these matches are going to be easy. And before the broadcast started, Peter, you mentioned that this might actually end up being the longest day of the World Cup. And you're expecting a lot of these games and matches to go down to the wire.
Absolutely. I mean, my feeling is that at least 5 matches will get done to that 3+2 segment. That's my take. And I'm even feeling like maybe 5 is an understatement. So I'm really looking forward to some marathon day.
That's quite a hot take by Peter. Chat, tell us what you think. How many games, how many matches are you expecting to get to that 3+2 sudden death tiebreaker? Right now, the record at this World Cup is 10 games of tie breaks, and it happened in round 1. It was an epic fight, which went down to the 3+2, and I think eventually being decided in game 2 of 3+2. But it's still a far way off as the day is just getting started. So let's continue our journey across all these big matchups. And Peter, I think the one player who everyone wants to get an update on is Iturizaga. He's the only player to have had made a comeback in his round 2. He started round 2 with a loss in game 1 and then managed to win an equalizer score to take it to playoffs. And not just in round 2, he also was the comeback kid from round 1.
Yeah, an incredible fighter, also showing why he's so good in this format. Yeah, we have been seeing this in the Champions Chess Tour as well. I mean, Iturizaga is a danger for anyone, and it was so nice seeing him in Division 1 doing also great things. So for the moment, fighting against Anton Korobov. Anton is also incredible fighter. He loves to grab the initiative, and we also see that he has actually sacrificed the pawn for the center. Yeah, I mean, white has a nice center. White has the pair of bishops. The only problem what he's missing from the position, exactly that his knight isn't that powerful. Imagine this knight from c3 being on f3. I believe that white would have beautiful compensation. With the knight on c3, it looks like more of a speculative compensation, not like a completely fully satisfied situation for white. Let me try to understand what happened just very quickly. So it was a Slav with d takes e4, and how did they ended up, just to see where this pawn sacrifice happened. Okay. So this knight a2, queen a4 was the critical moment, and Anton going for the center for the initiative, but apparently black has solved his problems. Yeah, so this is gonna be a big fight. I mean, it's gonna be a crazy game.
And it's also the style of these two players, both Anton and Iturizaga, aggressive players, not shying away from complications. We've often seen them refuse and decline those repetitions in absolute madness on the board. So this is going to be a big fight. And after listening to everything that you've just said and looking at the position, one does get the feeling that it is an extra healthy pawn. Sure, white's got the bishop pair, a bit more control on the center. But for now, it doesn't look like it's enough. It's almost as if Anton still has to prove that compensation. So fair to say that it's been a great opening start for the comeback kid, Iturizaga, in the World Cup so far. Peter, let's take this moment to also jump into some of the other action. And one board where the queens are off the board, and it might even end sometime soon, is Master Vasilis versus Vidit Gujarati. Let's get your quick update on that, because huge clock advantage for Vidit right now, but I really don't see him having an advantage on the board.
Wow, I mean, it's such a chaotic position. I have to first see what opening it was. Wow, it was some Scotch gambit or Danish gambit. I even don't know what's the name of this. Bishop b4 check c3. I mean, I used to know it as a kid, but yeah, this kind of stuff when white goes d4, ed, c3, and then even does not recapture on c3 back. But castle, I think this is the Danish gambit. Definitely. Knight f6, e5. So I'm a little bit surprised that Vidit is the one who is up on the clock, yeah, because usually those players who are playing these tricky kind of things from the white side, they are the experts, and you expect the opponent to spend time, but Vidit knows everything.
He's definitely prepared, but I don't know how prepared he would have been against this Scotch gambit, Danish gambit that you're talking. Playing the Danish in Baku right now, quite an interesting choice there. But Peter, the position as we have on the live board, Black is up a pawn. By the way, chat is confirming it is indeed the Danish gambit. Black is up an extra pawn, but look at that king. And even though the queens are off the board, it still feels like there are all these rook lifts that white is threatening. The rook coming to e3 with a potential check, the rook coming to e3 with a potential doubling up on the e line. And black massively behind in development. That knight on d8, bishop on c8, rook on a8, it looks like it's setting up for a Fischer random game right now. And that can't be good news. Unlike the Anton Korobov game, this looks like white has more than enough compensation for the pawn.
Yes, however, I believe that this extra pawn will help black to equalize and neutralize white's pressure, because there are also some kind of ideas like, yes, it's anti-positional to play c5 because it gives white the chance to jump with the knight to b5 and something, but I believe that time is very important. Yeah, if we can get something like c5, knight b5, and let's get this bishop out. I mean, for example, bishop f5, the bishop is eventually aiming towards the d3 square, then this knight will be developed from d8. Yes, white has nothing to worry about. The idea that you mentioned with rook e3, rook a1, rook g3 check, whatever, is still very much on, but I do feel that black should be fine.
I mean, I'm looking at our players' camera. You're mentioning that black should be fine, got that extra pawn. They both are really grooving right now. They both are really moving to the beat of the moves, is what it seems like. And of course, it's a tense situation. Peter, how much would you read into body language of these players?
Well, I mean, I think that one shouldn't really be caring too much as long as you understand what's going on the board, yeah, because then you feel like, okay, let him groove, I'm also happy, okay, I don't mind, but there are of course positions which you simply can't evaluate, and then your opponent seems to be super confident, and then you feel like, what's wrong with me? I mean, why am I not understanding what's going on in the position? And often this is kind of a bluff by the opponent just to signal that, yeah, everything is under control. In fact, his heart is maybe hitting like crazy and he's hoping to survive the next couple of minutes. Yeah, everybody has his own tricks, of course, but normally if you know and you understand and you can evaluate your position, then you don't have to care about your opponent.
Hmm. Groove it like you move it. But Peter, I know Vidit a little bit, and he's actually very much into meditation and just trying to keep those tense situation and mind under control in these very stressful situations. So it's going to be interesting to see how he handles it, because this endgame, even though it's a queenless, it's sort of like a queenless middle game. I don't even know if you can call it an endgame. There's still a lot of activity and play left here. Peter, is this a good time to check in back again with some of our top boards?
Yes, I think let's see with Hikaru, because it was a very interesting opening. I felt like he has long-term pressure, and well, the position simplified somewhat. Yeah, the whole queen side disappeared, but let's not be fooled. White still has the two bishops, and the bishop on d4 is a monster. So it might still be a bit scary for black. In fact, there are ideas like knight e5. I'm actually sympathizing with this move because I want to stop black from getting back the knight to c6. In this case, the knight is stuck on a7, and eventually we might be having some knight e5, g4 ideas trying to target black's king. If this knight would have to move and the bishop's diagonal would be open, then the g7 square would be a weakness. Probably black has to play the move rook c8 here. Nevertheless, white has some pressure.
And you were pointing about a king side attack. Hikaru does not go with knight e5. It's always in the air, but instead he's threatening to line up a battery with the bishop and the queen. The bishop falls back. The idea is clear. The queen from e2 will either shift to c2 or probably not to d3 because the rook on d8 is there. Queen c2, and then suddenly you've got all these ideas with the queen penetrating into black's camp. The other thing, very scary for Karthik right now, is Hikaru's clock. Almost twice the amount of time. And even though you've only got pawns on one side of the board, which means that the position is simplified, the bishop pair that Hikaru has, both of them, a bit like dragons, blowing fire towards Black's king side, it is still a dangerous position to defend for Karthik.
Yes, and it has the potential of Hikaru being able to keep the pressure on for quite some time. Also, let's just highlight that, for example, a move like knight d6 might be possible. Okay, rook c8 had been played. I wanted to highlight after knight d6 there was a possibility of a pin with bishop a3. So there are many tricks which the players have to consider. So black goes rook c8, tries to pin this knight.
One just gets the feeling we keep listening about loose pieces drop off and these attacking tactics. One can sense that there can be tactics in this position. With those two bishops lined up, the rook on c8 hanging, a potential queen and bishop battery for white. Peter, I think we're in for a bit of a tactical skirmish in this one.
Yeah, there are different things going on. And the biggest danger for black is that it's a long-term problem. I mean, I don't see like you make 1-2 precise moves and you solve your problems. No, I think the position is completely different. This will always give Hikaru the chance to keep on posing problems. Your clock is ticking down. Hikaru at the same time from the right side can very quickly make up his mind which direction he wants to go, put the pressure on the clock, on the position, and this combined pressure might be too much to handle. But for the moment, Karthik is holding on, but it's not going to be easy.
Not going to be easy on the board or the clock. And one thing to point out, which is in Karthik's favor, is that there are no pawns on the queen side. The exact same position, but imagine a set of extra pawns on the queen side. That gives Hikaru so many more targets. But it's a lot easier to defend in chess when you've got pieces and pawns just on one side of the board. The dream for black would be to try and trade off as many pieces as possible. Get those queens off the board, get the rooks off the board, and that would make the task much easier. Hikaru going for it in the center. He wants to push the pawn all the way to e5 to get rid of black's key defender on the king side, the knight on f6.
Yeah, this is a double-edged move because, yes, on one side it's very tempting to kick away this knight from f6, to go e4, e5, and eventually if the knight moves to d5, then white will be able to ask a very nasty question with queen e4, that how are you going to defend against queen h7, and if the answer is like you have to play a move like g6, that would weaken the dark squares heavily. So basically what I'm expecting is that black should try to reroute his knight to f8, because if he would be able to meet this idea of e5, queen e4 with the timely knight d7, f8, and he goes for it, knight d7, kind of a clever move. Very well played by Karthik. And also, by the way, yeah, that if white plays queen g4, as you mentioned, that if black gets a queen trade, that would be great news. So queen g4, queen g5 is another nice idea. This knight is now anyway going to be rerouted to g6. I'm not sure that I'm in love with this last move of Hikaru, but now he keeps on pushing. Yeah, if he already said A, he has to say B as well. e5 on the board.
In this case, he says e4. He has to say e5 to open up that light squared bishop. He wants to get that queen to e4, provoke black to make more weaknesses on the king side. But look at Karthik. He doesn't hesitate. He continues with that defensive path of the knight. Knight comes back to f8. This is a cemento, Peter, as you like to say. Just making sure that everything on the king side is safe.
Yes, exactly. And also, this bishop from e8 can eventually get back to the game via the long diagonal with bishop c6. We also see that now that white's pawn moved, advanced all the way to e5, the long diagonal will be open. So Hikaru has to be energetic here. What did he play? I think
Knight f8
yes,
on the board. And Hikaru has made a move. He's got his bishop out to d3. So eyeing some tactics on that knight to b5. Black always needs to watch out for any kind of tricks. Loose pieces drop off is the motto in chess, especially when you're running low on the clock. Peter, the way Karthik is handling it, playing all these accurate moves, it reminds me of their round one, where Hikaru with the white pieces was putting so much pressure, but Karthik kept finding amazing defensive resources. And even after the game was over, Hikaru did mention that his opponent just played so accurately that there wasn't much to be done, and the game ended in a draw. And it looks like Karthik is super good at handling the kind of pressure that Hikaru can put on him.
Yeah, it's incredible because I have the engine running, and the last three moves, knight d7, knight f8, queen g5, which was almost like instantly blitzed out by Karthik, were clearly the top choices of the computer. Yeah, so
Wow.
okay, one can argue that these are very natural human moves, yeah, because you understand that you have to regroup, but with the speed how he does it and with the confidence and against Hikaru, it's truly impressive.
You're saying these are natural human moves? To me, it just feels like natural superhuman moves, maybe, Peter. Not easy for everyone to find. But Karthik, the current reigning national Indian champion, is really holding his own against Hikaru Nakamura, but he has to watch out the clock. I do see the time advantage has reduced for Hikaru from almost double. Now it's about 6 minutes on the clock. Queen g5, that last move, I like it. It starts putting pressure on that g2 pawn, which right now might not be evident, but the move that you earlier pointed out, once the bishop comes on the long diagonal, black will start threatening checkmates of his own.
Yes, I mean bishop c6 is kind of clearly the next move, or knight g6. That's also a very nice move, and I feel like, yeah, white should be thinking a little bit about stabilizing, because if he could, if
Wow.
yes, I mean in a sense that now it's not the time to be too ambitious. You have to stabilize, because in long terms, maybe even now somewhere the queen trade could potentially be still an issue for black for long terms. I mean, black is more or less fine, but I mean the d6 square, and eventually, for example, just to illustrate, if we trade these queens and white gets the chance, yeah, knight g6 very important because it stops knight d6. I wanted to illustrate that the danger is if black just makes a move like, okay, bishop c6 runs into knight b6, not so easy to just make a move. But what I wanted to highlight, something like this, that if we get a pass pawn on d6 and we are able to push, for example, f2, f4, and then bring the king, despite having very little material, it still can be dangerous for black. Yeah, so I think these are the ideas that Hikaru has to have in mind, that now he does not need to be aggressive. Even just by stabilizing the position, he still will have his chances.
Peter, he might still have his chances, but the one player who's creating chances is Emre Can one more time against Wesley. And I think it's all happened on the very last move. Let's use this moment to just jump back to the Emre versus Wesley board, because you're not going to believe what just happened. We've got a brilliancy on the board, and you've got to back up just two moves to see how we got here.
Absolutely. I mean, wow. But the stunner, did Wesley think that, okay, everything is under control, there is no problem, and he rushed with his move? Because after queen c2, he opted for the move bishop b7, which ran into this devilish tactic, knight takes a7. If you capture with the queen back this knight, then white plays queen c7. And white will be collecting back a lot of material, and also not only collecting, but black's pawn on f7 and king on g8 on the 7th rank can be really crucial. Wow.
Look at the traffic jam on the 7th rank there in that line that you just pointed out. Peter, for the third time in this match, Wesley in huge trouble. Let's just have this position on the board. If this doesn't happen, white is just a pawn up. And look at this position. There's just no way for black to keep all the pieces together. Yes, you can pick up the a4 pawn, but after queen takes a4, white will go on to pick up the light squared bishop with big threats of the bishop coming to b5. Once the king goes to g2, and again, black is just tied up, not able to free his pieces. Wesley decides not to take the knight on a7, falls back with his own bishop to f8 to avoid all these positions. But this just means that Emre has an extra pawn, a big extra pawn. That a passer simply comes back with the knight. This is disaster for Wesley.
This is looking very, very dangerous. I mean, he's pawn down for nothing. His only hope is that, yes, he is trying to somehow go for some opposite colored bishop endgame, but even this is not going to help him, yeah, because bishop takes b5, bishop takes b5, the white's bishop will be super active there. And once the knight moves from d7, white will be able to put the knight on e5 as well. Of course, after protecting the pawn on d4. Yeah, Wesley is very shaky.
The first classical game between them, Emre had a slight edge. The second classical game between them, Emre was close to winning. This is the third game between these two players. And once again, Emre takes the lead in the position. Peter, will Wesley So get third time lucky in this match? It might be too much to ask. That's an extra pawn. But we've seen crazier things happen. Emre had an extra piece yesterday and didn't manage to win.
Yes, it was also some incredible defense by Wesley, also some big miss by Emre. On the other hand, this is a very simple type of position, and he also has clear time advantage. The big question, bishop c6 is some kind of a provocation, because white even has the option of advancing the pawn to a5, but usually you only want to push this, which weakens the b5 square if you think that you are winning. So, for example, after a5, the big question is how black reacts at all to this move. Because the bishop on c6 is loose.
And let's point that out, that it looks like a free pawn, but black can't take on a5 because that disconnects the queen from the bishop. So you're using that momentum to advance the pass pawn. Peter, I want to ask you from a psychological aspect right now. For Emre, he knows he's had so many missed chances, but he has one more big one right now. Do you think that's something that does play on a player's mind?
Well, probably. On the other hand, he should be super happy. Yeah, and he should be enjoying the momentum that he gets another chance. Yeah, it might have looked like yesterday was his golden opportunity, and after not using it, he might not get another chance in this match, but there it is. And now he has to do everything in his power to use that.
He has to grab this opportunity. And did you see him leaning forward? He knows that this is a big moment for him. Peter, a5, the move that you're pointing out, the more that I think about it, the more dangerous it appears, asking big questions, because I don't see another move except the black queen falling to b7 so that you can maintain contact with that light square bishop.
Yes, and then the big question is that how does white continue? Because now already we can't push the pawn to a6 because black simply takes it. And now the queen protects the bishop, and there is no good discovered move with the knight. So it's the big question that after a5, queen b7, what did we achieve? Yeah, it's there are some tactical ideas like knight a7, not trapping the bishop on c6, and maybe this is the problem. Maybe knight a7 here.
Okay, that's an incredible move. And the bar approves. Knight a7, you hit that bishop, and as you pointed out, white might think that the white knight doesn't have squares, but it's the bishop that doesn't have any squares.
Yes, and then if we trade, that's basically almost the kind of same trade like I was claiming that if bishop takes b5, we don't worry about it. And the pawn on a5 has already also advanced. I mean, this might just be game over. Wow,
spot a5. That's the big question right now. There might be other moves in the position that do keep the advantage, but a5 just looks so direct. It looks absolutely concrete. And when you're playing against the very best in the world, when you have these opportunities to go into a concrete line that increases their advantage, you've got to grab that opportunity with both hands. And Wesley earlier was looking quite distraught, not looking at the chessboard. He's again looking away, low on the clock. Emre about a 4-minute think right now, and it will all be justified if he finds the move a5.
Yes, because he can also simply continue the position, but if he continues the position, then he might be kicking himself of having wasted 5 minutes here. Because basically black is not threatening anything. You can just make a move like h4, you can play king g2, nothing is happening, you keep on improving your position. But the fact that he's spending these 5 minutes is clearly because of he's trying to calculate the forced lines with a5.
Peter, but you know what is difficult is if he takes this time and doesn't play a5, he's reaching out for the a pawn, it's on the board.
Wow. Shows confidence, queen b7 played.
And he blitzes out knight a7.
That's it. Yeah, because it was connected. Yeah, knight, this a5 move, you had to foresee the move knight a7 in order to really go for a5 in a practical game, and he has done it. Excellent job by Emre. Of course, he has to be careful. He has seen it yesterday that he already probably felt like he's winning, and then Wesley was still coming up with some incredible resources. But it's going to be super tough for Wesley.
Just amazing professionalism there by Emre. He takes his time, he calculates, navigates the complications, finds the precise move. Wesley, with a shake of head, knows that it's all gone wrong, loses that bishop pair, and now this a pawn is not a pawn. It's far more dangerous than that. The knights have been traded. And you can't push that pawn one step ahead. Go a6. That bishop on f1 will keep everything defended. Peter, queen a4, another really strong move you're pointing out. Wesley So, head in hands. This is big trouble for the big favorite.
This is a very big trouble, exactly, because the combination of the a4 square with the queen and the a pawn will also give white the chance of kicking that knight away from c6, and that would enable white also to enter with his queen to e8 all the way, and queen a4 on the board. Yeah.
Peter, and we're getting an update that there was some really interesting stuff in the Fedosiev game. Maybe we'll just quickly jump to that, take a look at that, and come straight back to this, which might be a big upset. But if we go over to Pishak versus Fedosiev, and it was all the way on move 16, I'm being told. There was a really nice tactic. Maybe you can just quickly take us through what happened.
Well, so this is the position. Black has just captured knight takes e4 and probably equalized the position. And then Pehac, because I think Yergu's name is Pehac. I was also fooled by his name, but now I'm completely sure about that. He's Pehac. He opted for long castle. He's such an incredible, creative, aggressive player. However, here, did he overpush his luck, or was it deliberate? Yeah, he goes for the attack with rook d7. However, b takes c6. Oh my god, I think that he just blundered this b takes c6, because it looked like black will have to take the rook, but if black takes the rook, then probably white is just crushing through with rook takes c7. That was the plan, at least. But after b takes c6, rook takes c7, king d8, there is a danger on the rook on h1, and there is a fork coming up with knight d3, knight takes f4, which will also leave the rook on c7 hanging. So it's some crazy tactic. And thanks to this, Fedosiev is probably winning the game.
Incredible. Such a cool and a calm move in the middle of madness to just grab that c6 pawn, the geometry, full board awareness there by, as he's known as the big fish on Chess.com, Vladimir Fedosiev. Great tactic, great full board awareness there. And Peter, just do an action replay of this move, b takes c6, to just understand the position as it was. White's rook is hanging. It's a fork on the board. And Pihash, as you mentioned, goes in with the rook to d7 with ideas of his own, and definitely missing the move b takes c6. It's so easy for that move to not be on your radar.
Exactly. This is what he was dreaming of. It's a win. Or if black would be running away to the corner, then white probably just takes on f7, and after the move king a8, c takes b7 is checkmate. So Yergusis was dreaming of some brilliancy prize with rook d7, and then the cold shower hit him with b takes c6, rook takes c7 check, king d8. Usually rook c7 check almost automatically finishes the game. That's why it's so easy to completely forget about b takes c6, and suddenly he's losing the bishop, and Fedosiev, the big fish, is having a technically winning position.
Great tactics there, Peter. We will keep an eye out if Big Fish converts this, but it looks like he will. The top board's huge action there. Wesley close to losing his game. Meanwhile, Anish Giri has managed to turn things around and is the one in driver's seat. He's the one with the big advantage right now. And I think that's because he has an extra piece on the board currently. But white is threatening to pick it up. Why is this completely winning for black?
Well, let's understand. Yeah, well, because it's black to move. That's the trick.
Fair enough.
That's the trick. Yes, so, wow,
But
things have
is
turned.
Is it that easy? It might be black to move, but is it that easy to actually defend your pieces?
Well, I mean, first of all, even if we would just move that bishop back, probably we should be better. That's my guess. But maybe also there are some other tactical possibilities because also White's construction, I mean, the second rank is completely wide open. Yeah, so maybe even, I don't know, some rook c2, knight takes b1, queen a2 ideas. But queen e4 doesn't do anything. Then okay, hang on. We also have rook c2, forcing
And then
knight
after
takes
queen
b1.
e4, the c4
And
pawn falls as well.
exactly, yeah, queen e4, and then we just take on c4, and we destroyed White's construction completely. It should be simply winning.
Wow, so Nesterov is the one who had a great start in the opening, but Anish doing Anish things here has managed to turn it around. Knight c3 on the board, and the construction that Peter's pointing out, if Anish is able to spot that, he reaches out for the rook, it's on the board. I think we're going to see this being played out. And Peter, while it is the big favorite here on this board who has things under control, let's go back to the Wesley board. Can Emre finally get that point that he's been so close to in their two classical games? Or at least one.
Yes, after queen a4, bishop d6 happened. And he's taking his time because he knows exactly that, yeah, if he can break through the defense, then it's over. Okay, the very first move that comes to mind is what happens after a6. Is black going to play queen b6 or queen c7? Because black needs to keep an eye on this knight on c6.
Also, we probably don't need to go there, but I have my eye out on the first board as well. And even though it's a tense position, but it's going to be a long grind. And I feel, Peter, this is the one that we perhaps should spend a little time in because it could be a very critical, decisive moment here.
Yeah, it's looking very bad. And bishop b5 is played. So Emre does not want to make a committal move like a6. He wants to have the dark squares under control. Probably now the knight will fall back to a7, and then white will bring the bishop back to d3. And then, however, black gets a chance to play queen c6. I'm not sure that I'm liking this. Yeah, now the move queen c6, definitely black would be dreaming of trading down the queens and then try to sit on this blockade on the a7 square.
But maybe white, and he goes for queen c6, maybe white can just decline the trade and fall straight all the way back. Not a happy move to make, but queen a1 also guards against any checks on c1. You've got everything under control. a6 is coming in. The knight eventually from f3 will find its own play. Maybe it's time for Emre to keep the queens on the board.
Yeah, he definitely should keep the queens on the board, but I feel like with the last two moves, knight a7 and queen c6, black improved his position. Of course, white is still clearly better, and if this would have been the position, would be saying that, wow, this is fantastic for white. But knowing what we had two moves before, it looks like black has improved, and the nerves are coming into play. Now suddenly Wesley is up on the clock, and he's trying to get this momentum. So queen d1 played.
Under 4 minutes for both these players. So not queen a1, but queen d1, a different move. Peter, I thought that maybe the queen on a1 could also assist the a pawn, but Emre probably has different ideas. The a pawn will go to a6. The h pawn
I think that,
advancing.
yeah, he wants to combine play on both sides. He says that, you know what, I'm going to push the pawn to a6. The knight on a7 is a nice blockading piece, but it does not put any pressure on the d4 pawn. And using the fact that white has much more pieces eyeing the king side, any kind of action could be very dangerous for black's king in the long term.
We need more of that orange on the board, Peter.
Yes, I mean, okay, I can also push that pawn. But it's not orange anymore, sorry.
That's fine, but that would be a red hot pawn if it did get down to a6. Wesley trying to keep the pressure on the clock, making moves fast because it's going to be all about getting Emre into time pressure so he can't find the precise way to convert this position. That's usually the strategy when you're worse. Emre jumping in with the knight. I like this, Peter, because if black was to trade the bishop with the knight, not only do you improve your pawn structure, but ending up with that light squared bishop against black's knight is a very favorable trade for Emre in this position.
Yeah, it's a very difficult choice now for black, because if you don't take on e5, then also how long you can tolerate that monster knight on e5, which is eyeing the king side, also hitting the queen, and these pawns f7 g6. The pawn on g6 will be very vulnerable because white will go h4 h5, and will keep on creating more and more targets on the king side.
Peter, this game is going to go on for a few more moves. Let's take this opportunity to just jump around on our top board, Hikaru against Karthik, and get your update on that. We already have one result coming in with Maxime Vachier-Lagrave and Dragnev. Their first rapid game has indeed ended in a draw. This one is still on, and wow, look at that. The clock situation almost level now.
Yeah, Kartik has been playing quickly. It does feel like Hikaru is making progress because he gets access to the d6 square. The big question is, how important is that d6 square? Because black was able to activate the rook to d5. It's so important because if the rook would be on d8, and at that moment something lands on d6, then the rook on d8 will be passive. I'm loving this move, rook d5. However, still, to my eyes, it looks like white should be better, but you should never underestimate the knight on f8 and the bishop on e8 in these structures, because they are. And Hikaru takes it. Hikaru just took on f8, eliminated this knight on f8, and jumps with the knight to d6.
Takes. Logical. And then goes in with his own knight to d6. A really nice quest. So he trades off the dark squared bishop. He's got that post forever. Peter, is this the kind of position that Hikaru will try and grind out for a long time?
Yes, for sure. I mean, the knight on d6 guarantees some pressure. I mean, of course, the big question will be that when the black knight reaches back to c5, how strong it will be. I mean, will it help black to get rid of all the white's pressure? Or even when the knight retreats to c5, it will be still headache. Because for the moment also we have to deal with this bishop on e8. I'm not sure that we want to. Eventually our king will be very exposed if this king will have to recapture on e8. So maybe we have to move the bishop.
I like that idea. You can move the bishop to c6. Your knight comes to c5 at the next moment. In case there's an attack on the bishop, I don't really see how you can do it. Bishop e4 runs into the rook trade. If after bishop c6, bishop c4 also runs into a rook trade. He is having a think after knight d6. I do not like the concept of black actually allowing the trade on e8 and the king going all the way to e8. It just feels like it would be unsafe there, but he goes in with the queen instead, playing aggressive chess here, Karthik. And I like it because it really ties down white's queen on f1 to defend that key f4 pawn, putting pressure of his own.
Exactly. Also, it's a kind of nice active move, at the same time a defensive move, because any kind of f4, f5s are never possible due to queen takes e5. So I'm expecting Hikaru to jump back with the knight to c4, yeah, kicking that
He
queen
does
away.
it.
Yes, he does
He
it,
does
but it came at the cost of bringing his knight back.
Peter, it's so hard to predict what's going to happen in this game, but I will tell you one thing. I don't believe this will end in a draw. The speed with which the players are playing, the determination that they're playing with, and what I like is that Karthik isn't backing down. He's not going for the passive defensive approach. He's keeping offense of his own.
Yeah, he's doing extremely well. The big question is that when the clock ticks down, and we see that he's now down to 1 minute 50 seconds,
Oof.
and he still has to solve problems. I mean, where do you put that queen? Because if you put it on c5, you take away the c5 square from the knight, and he goes back to a7. I'm liking it because he has to keep this option of eventually jumping back with the knight to c5.
And I'm loving the camera work here. We've got Hikaru in the foreground, and then right behind him, there's Wesley, the other big game that's going on. So we can kind of keep an eye on the live action from Baku on both these key matchups right now. And the queen has fallen back to a7. What are the chances of Hikaru returning with knight d6 and there actually being a repetition at this point?
No repetition from
No,
Hikaru.
no
No,
repetition.
it's ruled out. I mean, Hikaru will try everything, but he will not repeat.
And he doesn't. Wait, what did he play? He played rook to b1.
Yeah, kicking the knight away.
And I think we have a move. We have a move by Karthik. He jumped in with the knight.
Wow,
Wait,
knight
what?
d2. Wow, and knight takes d2, queen
Whoa!
e3, insisting on entering with the queen to e3. What a
What a
move.
move! Found in seconds. It's exactly like Emre's tactic of sacrificing a knight and then entering with a queen, taking advantage of a white's hanging pieces. The bishop is hanging, the knight is hanging.
But still,
Amazing
Hikaru,
play.
yeah, it's wonderful play, but Hikaru can still play knight c4, and after queen takes d3, trade everything and go with his knight to d6, and then try to enter with the rook to b8. However, black will be able to go king e7, bishop c6, and that should be good enough with counterplay on d2. We will be seeing
Peter,
this.
this
Let's just very quickly show this what I'm talking about. That's something like this. Rook b8 would be deadly now, but it's black to move and black can activate the bishop. And for example, after rook b8 check, go king e7 and get a counter-attack with rook d2 against the g2 pawn. So those are the possibilities that the players are considering right now.
It's on the board, by the way. Everything that you just mentioned has been played. Knight is on d6. Karthik reaching out for the bishop. The move bishop to c6 is about to happen. He's touching the 1 minute mark. And he needs to watch out for the threat that you mentioned. But this is the point we were making. Imagine if there was an extra set of pawns on the queen side. Hikaru would really have something to fight for. And right now, Karthik is just happy that all the pawns are on the king side. No weaknesses on the other side of the board.
Yes, now the big question is bishop c6 or bishop d7. I understand his hesitation. Of course, bishop c6 is a move that you want to make. On the other hand, it can be attacked. Yeah, bishop c6 can run into rook c1 or rook b6, but he goes for bishop c6. I think this is the absolute cleanest move. And how to
Amazing,
keep the
resourceful
pressure.
play.
Yes.
And Peter, Karthik has been so impressive playing in this. He's making his debut at the World Cup and playing against the world number 2 and finding all these moves with just seconds on the clock. The bishop's attacked. He's going to move it. But you've got to watch out because a move like bishop d5 can run into rook to c7, penetrating the 7th rank. So you have to keep the f7 pawn defended.
Exactly. Now he goes bishop d7, and compared to the other action, with the rook on c1, now white is unable to go rook c8, or I mean rook b8. And if white goes rook c7, black simply plays king e7. And thanks to the fact that the rook protects back the bishop on d7, the tactic with knight takes f7 does not work. And after black will start trading pawns, yeah, h4 played by Hikaru stopping g5, because g7, g5 would have been a thematic move. Now the question, do we see f7, f6? Black should try to trade as many pawns as possible and also to dislocate the knight on d6. Okay, first king e7 and next probably f6.
There was a feature chat asking that, do you think Karthik will flag? There is a 10-second increment every time a player moves. And thank God for that, because otherwise that would be the case. A player would get flagged. Hikaru going in with his rook. I think Hikaru is still very ambitious about his position. He wants to combine the pawn storm on the king side at some point, trying to gain more space, more ideas with the g pawn moving forward, with his rook and knight domination in the center of the board.
Yes, and also because of course black will want to play f6 followed by rook d5, hitting that e5 pawn. Here f6 played. White still has this knight b7, knight c5 idea, putting pressure on the rook and the bishop, and eventually trying to activate the king and hope for some king and pawn endgame where white's king is more active. But I don't really see that happening. Black will always be able to unpin himself with king d8 with the rook on d5, and that should be it. It should be holding.
It's going to come down to whether in 40 seconds Karthik can evaluate that king pawn ending and the potential of that being holdable or not. Or will he burn too much clock? Hikaru does have the option to go knight b7. Look at the focus on him. He's just trying to understand which move offers him the best possible chance to take this point.
Yeah, also how to pose some more problems, because he feels that his opponent is very low on the clock.
He takes on f6. Black can't pick up the knight because then the pawn will pick up the g7 pawn and there's no way to stop it from queening. So Karthik has to recapture on f6.
Yes, with the pawn. So g takes f6 is played, and then Hikaru goes for knight b7. So he's trying to play some pawn endgame or threaten with the pawn endgame, with eventually going some g4, g5, and trying to queen his h pawn, but Black's king should be close enough.
And a result update, Anish Giri has won his first rapid game against Nesterov. Peter, do you want to quickly go to the Wesley game? Because I think that's about to end as well. We have him in the background there on our screen. This end game will go on for a while. We will come back to it. But let's get an update on the Wesley board. Because take a look at what's happening there.
Wow, what? Amazing turnaround. Actually, now Black is totally safe. If anyone, then only Black can be better. Okay, probably the pawn on a6 will compensate, but now I would not rule out that Wesley wins this. Exactly, queen c6. Can he go, or queen e6, queen c? I mean, if the Black queen enters into White's camp, it could be checkmate against White's king. What a turnaround. And both moves, both moves, queen e6, queen c6, they look very tempting and strong.
Wesley has done it again. And look at that bar, completely winning for Black. And it's Emre who's on the defense. Probably once the match is over, once the game is over, we can have a look at where it all turned around. But now with the opposite color bishop, the different color complex of the bishops, it's all about the attack against the king. And Wesley can start playing for checkmate against White's king.
Yeah, queen c3. So he's trying to, okay, computer says it's a mistake, but it's a very natural move. Queen f3 check, trying to collect all the pawns.
But White's the one who collects the first central pawn, putting pressure on e4 as well as the bishop on d4.
Yeah, why did Wesley give up his d5 pawn? That's a big mystery, because, of course, if White gets to the e4 pawn, then suddenly everything is defended, everything is harmonious. Black will have to play the move f7, f5. I mean, but it does allow many checks. No, Wesley goes queen f3 check.
You've got to move the king to c1.
Yes, we're gonna see king c1 happen immediately, I believe. And then if White takes on e4, then everything is protected. How does Wesley tries to checkmate?
Well, he does take on f2. So if White was to pick up on e4, which he does, and give a check on f1, White's king just moves. No, you can block it with the bishop. Maybe his idea is just to go queen f1.
Exactly, but we always have bishop d1 blocking that check. It isn't a problem. Wow, this looks like the game will end in a draw after all these incredible dramas.
So much drama in this entire match, Peter. Their classical games were full of drama, and this one as well. He gives a check with the bishop. Don't go to d1. That's a checkmate in one. You have to go with your king to b1 or b2. That's fine. That's safe.
Yes, b2. Yeah, he moved king b2.
That's actually very precise, because king b1 would have run into queen f1 with big trouble. And look at Wesley. He's actually looking around to see what just happened on the Hikaru board.
Yeah, and he's trying to... I mean, still, White has to watch out, because bishop d4 check is now a huge threat, and king a2 will be met by queen a1 checkmate, but queen e5 check. Queen e5 check is possible.
I think he played another move. He moved the bishop, so creating an escape square for his own king, and it's a bad move. Is it because queen?
Well, queen c1 check.
King
I mean,
a2?
queen c1 check, then queen a3 check, and then I take on b3 with a check, and take it from there. That looks awful.
He's about to play it. He gives a check from f2 instead.
Wow! He gives a chance for White to save bishop c2.
And our Evalbar is having the busiest day in the office right now.
Wow, but the question is that if... Okay, bishop d4 happened. So how do we defend? Queen e2? Is that a move, or do we run with... I mean, queen e2 looks like the most natural human move. But okay, check will come, and then queen back to a1. What happened? The moves are coming in.
He just picked up the g3 pawn. He went queen e2, Peter. And I can see on our live camera that the g3 pawn has been snapped off. And a different dynamic now as Emre pushes the f pawn, f5, trying to open up Wesley's king. f5 is on the board.
Yes, I mean,
Wesley's
the momentum...
just going pawn hunting.
Yeah, he has to collect. He has to collect. He has missed his chance of going for the checkmate. Now he has to try to pick up material.
No one wants to win, and no one is about to lose either. Look at the dynamic balance that the position is on for the last, I don't even know how many moves, but the pressure and the hesitation on Emre right now. He's got 11 seconds.
Yeah, and very annoying. His king is still unsafe. The dark square bishop on d4 is a monster, protecting against the a pawn and also creating all the mating threats.
Pete, I think our
We
live
can-
board isn't able to keep up with the speed with which the players are playing. Queen f1 happened, queen h2 on the board. Maybe we can just make the moves. Queen f1, queen h2, threatening a mate in one on b2, and white had to fall back with the bishop to c2.
Yes, but this is again looking very, very dangerous.
And Wesley goes queen d2, trying to set up a battery with queen c3, threatening a big, big mate on the dark squares.
Yes, queen c3 and okay, queen h1. But how do we defend against queen c3?
We don't. It's just one check on b7. The king on h6 is absolutely safe.
Yes, this opposite colored bishop. The bishop on d for the monster.
But Peter, we know that it's winning for black because we have the eval bar with us. But with no idea about the eval bar, Wesley, will he go for the bishop checks? No, he's playing for the win. He's playing for the win. He's not playing for a repetition here.
Yeah, of course, I'm trying to press the refresh button all the time, but we are not getting the moves yet. And that's it.
Handshakes. The last move by Wesley, the bishop check. Eventually, he would win the bishop on d1. What a game, what a turnaround, what a comeback. And for the first time in his match against Emre, Wesley takes a lead and Emre has to win on demand the second rapid game to take it into the next playoff. Peter, an unexpected twists and turns in that one, but the Hikaru game is still on. So let's quickly rush over to our live action.
Yeah, completely crazy what we have just witnessed. And this is the game. Okay, this is very, very drawish, but Hikaru can keep on playing. Keep on playing because, okay, there is just no forced way of getting rid of this position. Of course, the position is draw. It's 2 versus 2 on the king side, but white has the pawn structure, g3, h4, which makes his knight on d5 very, very vulnerable against the pawn on f6 and h5. So some weaknesses, but the material is not enough. Of course, objectively, this is a draw.
It might be, but it's never a draw when you're playing against Hikaru. You'd really have to earn that draw. And we see Wesley, he's still got a second rapid game to play, but he's also having a look. He can't move from his place. He wants to see what happens at the end of this game. His countrymate, Hikaru Nakamura, trying to squeeze a win in this one. You know, when you're playing against a guy like Hikaru, his body language is so strong. You have to have a lot of mental strength to survive. Just the confidence with which he plays and presses the clock.
Exactly, yeah. These are the toughest moments. For example, now, so you have to deal with the threat of rook f7. So yeah, black goes rook f3, going after the pawn. And thanks to the fact that after rook f7, rook takes g3, rook takes f6, you will have the move bishop g6, because king g7 would run into a fork with knight h5. So still everything is very tricky, but just move per move, it seems like black is exactly surviving this. He can capture on g3.
Ooh, look at the hesitation on him. And he's got 13 seconds on the clock.
He has to take on g3. No, he gives a check.
And that's okay, but he can still pick up on g3. He continues to give a check, which actually gets white's king closer to the king's side.
Exactly. Basically, it means that he doesn't believe that he can take on g3. He just doesn't believe that.
15 seconds, and he doesn't take it. And that is trouble, because he's moved the bishop, and look at Hikaru's expression. Hikaru knew that the way to survive was to take on g3, and this is his big chance. He senses it.
Yeah, Kartik playing a fantastic defense, and then basically just one little touch at the end would have finished the game on the spot. But now we might be in for a long Hikaru grind.
Or a short Hikaru grind, Peter, because with that body language shift, it feels like Hikaru can smell blood here. Should he pick up that f6 pawn instantly?
Well, rook f6, king h7, knight takes h5, bishop d1. That's the defense Kartik is relying on. So it might look like white is collecting all the pawns, but in fact, thanks to bishop d1, black will be attacking the pawn on g3. So thanks to this, maybe black is holding on and surviving.
Now I know why you said it's going to be a long Hikaru grind, because what you're expecting is a rook and knight versus rook.
Well, it's if it's only the h pawn, I mean, the black might not necessarily be forced to sacrifice the bishop, but okay, rook versus rook knight is also quite an elemental. But no, Hikaru will play rook c7. He will force the rook trade, and then he will try to play that position on forever with the knight king versus the bishop and king.
Again, technically a draw, but to hold it against a player like Hikaru is a whole different ball game. Throw all the technicalities out of the window. Oh, Hikaru repeats with another check. So rook f7 now would be a third time repetition. So no rook c7.
But I think he will have to trade the rooks, because if he doesn't trade, then he will have no chances.
Knight h5. Peter, he's got knight h5, and once again the moves are coming in so fast.
Yeah, but now okay, black will hold this. This is now already a draw. And also the situation that now the pressure is gone, black can play very quickly his moves. He will accumulate time on the clock. This is just a couple of moves away, but Hikaru will try with knight e6, knight f8 check. I mean, all kinds of tricks are still there. The knight is jumping.
The knight is jumping, and Wesley So is still there. He's got a second game to play. Someone tell him.
Okay, I think Wesley is incredibly relieved. He just feels like, okay, how many lives do I have? Yeah, this is kind of the question.
And when you're playing in a format like the World Cup, you need as many of those lives as possible. Wesley So has taken the lead in his match. Hikaru trying to win this one. He has the option to give out the bishop for the pawn, but it's not. I think he's going to decide to play with the bishop. He's not going to go into a pure rook and knight versus rook endgame until it's absolutely forced.
Yes, it's simply not necessary. I mean,
wow. Peter, how impressive would this hold be by Kartik playing against Hikaru Nakamura and holding it with the black pieces in rapid?
Yeah, incredible. But I think he will be holding. I just don't see any real chances now, because simply he will always get the 10 seconds per move. Yeah, so there won't be any time issue. And how do you create? The only idea that I can see is somehow to push the pawn to h6 and then give a check against black's king. But whenever the pawn is pushed to h6, black can simply put the bishop on g6, and all trades are drawn, and the pawn on h6 is falling. So Hikaru can't push h6. He has to keep on shuffling his pieces.
And you can sense the frustration once again creeping on to Hikaru. He just doesn't understand, how is his opponent not cracking?
Yeah, well, I mean, there was a moment in this game where there was a real threat on Kartik, but now I think he will, if he already survived all the way up till here, he will hold it. Yeah, rook g5, going for the idea of eventually targeting that pawn on h5 with bishop d1, forcing the pawn to h6, and then setting up some bishop c2, bishop g6 ideas, just to make sure that the game will end. Because otherwise, if Hikaru can play on forever, it's of course very, very annoying. Rook f8 played.
And it's a good thing that Kartik has got some extra time on the clock, offering a rook trade there. And if that's accepted, that's a draw on the spot. Hikaru showing that he's not ready for this game to end just yet.
Yes, of course. I mean, as long as he can hold on to his pawn, it's fine. Rook
and
g4.
There's a knight on the board. I feel as if I would have blundered and walked into a fork about 20 moves ago.
Yes, no, it's completely crazy. I only feel that okay, now the situation has more or less clarified. It should be holdable, but I feel I can't hold myself. Can I have a very quick break? I will be back in a minute. Can you hold the show because I need emergency.
Sure, Peter, I'll be here. We'll be waiting for you. Take your time. We'll go full screen with the players and see this game as it is reaching its conclusion. And there we see we've got the clocks also in front of us. 25 seconds for Hikaru, under 20 seconds for Karthik. All he has to do is keep the nerves in control. And look at that. He goes for an exchange sacrifice, going in for a theoretically draw endgame. Also, Black's king is on the right corner. It needs to be on the opposite color of the light squared bishop. That h8 square is the key square for the king. The bishop on the light squares. This is elementary draw. The man has done it. And Hikaru there with a shake of his head. He can't believe that once again, Karthik Venkataraman has survived the Hikaru Nakamura onslaught. And the only important thing for Black in these positions is to make sure that the king is on the right corner. And the good news for Karthik is that that's already the case. One is just wondering how long Hikaru will try